What's up, everybody? It's Kevin and Sergey once again welcoming you back to the channel for the first episode in our new series, kind of taking a deeper look into the structure of Antares 2. And with us today, we have the illustrious Tim Bancroft.
Hello, everybody.
Good to have you back, Tim. We'll hopefully be able to convince Tim to join us on as many of these episodes as he's able to join us on.
Sure.
But today, what are we going to be talking about, Sergey?
Today, we're going to be talking about probably one of the biggest changes in Antares version 2, and that is army building. A whole lot has gone on. Tim has really reworked almost every single army in pretty significant ways, and also fairly awesome ways, if I do say so myself. Tim, do you want to jump in and tell us the major shifts from Antares version 1 to Antares version 2?
Yeah, well, the major shifts were the original design constraints were effectively driven by Warlord and what they wanted to do with version 2. But so over the last 3 months or so, I've had to reverse all those out and bring it all back to in line with the units in version 1, so that everything that's actually available out there is actually in these lists, and we've tried not to put anything new over. The only new things are going to be the phase rifle, the Isoran's phase rifle, which is something that was coming from version 2. So basically all the squads should be there. Some of the squad sizes have changed, basically because they have all been playtested. Every single one of these lists that we've issued have been playtested. And rather than actually say you've got a Concord drone army list, we've now got selectors. So you have a Concord army, and then you've got a select with a Concord army, which will be a strike force, which is one selector, and then you've got a drop force. And each selector stands for a general tactical approach that army is likely to use. But the key thing is that everything's been play tested. There is two things that we had over the last 4 years which have not been released, and one of those is a feral army and one of those is a mercenary army. And the real reason for not issuing those is that we didn't have the playtesting experience, and I don't want to just dump lists onto players if they haven't actually been playtested, if you see what I mean. So as a result, the ferals are sort of like in the freeborn Vardosi and in the Rogue Nuhu selector, and it's sometime maybe we'll get a feral selector sometime, which will be probably in a separate feral list, frankly, and we'll just allow ferals to be used in a Vardosi or Rogue Nuhu force. But that's what they're based on. They're based on play experience. They're based on the new point system, and they are based on how things best play, because we're no longer tied to actually trying to sell models in a particular groups. We're no longer actually tied to promote models or particular things at all, and Skytrex are going to be stepping in to actually sell the models to players as part of, if you like, I don't know, the official line. I'm not sure if that's a good name for it, but as part of the actual Antarian line. So each selector, as I said, reflects a major tactical option for that list. So I think you're going to use the Boromites as an example, aren't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're also used as the example force in the Playing the Game book, which is where you'll find all the rules about army selection basics and how to do it. So anyway, if we start off from the very, very start, basically you have a faction and you say, I'm going to build a Boromite force. You then choose what selector you're going to use within that force. So the Boromites, for example, have got 3 different selectors. I think that's more than most other armies, if I remember rightly.
Correct, yeah.
Yeah, so the Boromites have got a clan workface force, which is those people who you've disturbed right at the workface. They are coming out to defend their claim, so they have got their mining tools, they've got their big mining borers, they might have a few rock-nibbling creatures, i.e. the Lavens, and they'll have things like an overseer and all of that sort of unit. So you will not find many actual military units in that. Now, moving on from that, you've got the guild security, which is supposed to represent a guild force, i.e. a whole bunch of clans clubbing together to actually go to war with somebody else, or to actively make a serious attempt at defending something important. So that is the more militaristic list. So what you can get in that is you'll have fewer workgangers. So you can only take a few because there's only a few people who's turned up with their mining tools. And you can imagine looking around at everybody else's mag gun thinking, oh, what's going on here?
Yeah. You've brought your pitchfork and torch to like a bunch of guys with AK-47s.
Yeah, that's what's going on, exactly what's going on there. But what you can do instead, you can take a lot of security gangers, who are the guys with the mag guns and everything else. You can also take the workface. You can still take the workface tools, but you're more likely to be able to get access to the more militaristic weapons. And they're called, to separate them out, they're called guild weapon teams and guild specialist weapons teams. So that's your heavy mag cannon, that's your mag light support, that's your heavy mag lights, your heavy mag support, your mag heavy support, sorry, I think it's called. And then you've got the specialist weapons teams, with plasma cannon and all the rest of it and that sort of stuff. So that's the actual army. In that, you'll also have access to some of the militaristic options on the haulers and that sort of stuff. The third one is the Laven Breeders. Now, everybody knows that the Borromites love their little lava mites. And they have got, one of the things that's all throughout the fluff is this almost awe they have of the people who breed the lava mites for them. And the Laven Breeder force reflects that. It's a force raised by one of the Lavamite breeder clans, or the specialist. I don't know. I'd hesitate to say stables, because I would imagine the Lavamites would just eat stables.
Yeah.
but you get the idea. And the very different. The thing about that is that you can have a few work gangs. You can have a few workface teams, because they've got to hollow out the rock to actually try and feed. You're going to feed the Lavamites. So I want to tear out bits of particularly juicy rock and say, oh, nice bit of mica in here. Here we go, and feed it to Lavans. But the thing about that is that you can take almost any numbers of Lavamites you want. So you can take any number of actual Lavamite handler teams, the Lavamite handlers with their Lavamites. You can take a whole bunch of Rock Riders. You can take any numbers of those you like. You can take several commanders, Rock Rider Overseer commanders, and one of the really interesting twists in it is that if you really wanted to, you could actually field 2 matronite brood mothers or more at the higher levels.
Nightmarish.
Yeah.
I also want to point out that all of these units that Tim is talking about, they've really rebalanced a lot. The Lavamites, for example, are now significantly more expensive than they were, and a little bit less effective than they were in version 1. Which, I mean, as a person who spammed a lot of Lavamites, they were way
many
too strong.
pan-humans have met their end.
Yeah, exactly. The Locamites are now buffed, so they're way more effective, which is awesome. Huge balancing factors all the way through all of the lists.
So that gives you an idea. Those are the actual selectors then within the lists, within each faction. But this is one thing we have to actually stress, as you can see from that lot. That's all those selectors are built from the narrative. And that's something that's absolutely key to Gates of Antares. Now we're freed up from having to sell models. We can actually focus more on the game and on the flavor and on the narrative. So all the selectors are actually built around that core concept. Antares was never really a list building game like 40k was, and it was definitely a far more narrative play game. But what we've done now is actually really just said, no, that is what we are. We are a narrative play game. We don't have to sell models, but there are models to support the game. So let's focus on the playing. It's there
Absolutely.
To play, and it's and I know people have a lot of fun out of trying to tailor their 40k lists to be really dominant and critical, whatever, and that's fine. It's a way of playing. Remember Rick invented 40k. So there's no beef about it. It's a very different game, and the lists are now balanced a lot more towards the core mechanics in Antares than they were previously. By core mechanics, I mean every game has got something that's core to it. In 40k, for example, as I said, it's list building. In Antares, it's actually the order dice and the pinning mechanic. So really, for Antares, you really do need to make sure you cost the order dice. So every order dice now costs 2 points, basically. If you have a look at your list, you'll find that an order dice will cost 2 points. And what we've also done is restrain some of the crazier manipulations around order dice draws that were there or have been in various iterations throughout the various books, which we've then had to issue errata for. So the lists are there for narrative and gameplay, but they are more balanced. They could actually be used. We found that they're actually more likely to be used in tournament sort of style plays, because you can't quite do that overloading of spam, which was the issue, for example, with some lists like the Outcast Rebels. Okay.
So when you get into actual list building, like I said, we're using the Boromite Rock Breeders as an example. Where do you start? And let's talk about some of the force level limitations and stuff. Let's start with a 50-point army.
Yeah, absolutely. 50-point army would be sort of like an entry point army, though we have used ones lower than that. Basically, what we've done. One of the criticisms in the version 1 lists was that the different tactical, strategical, support and all the rest of it, and the various levels, so you got that 2x2 matrix, are were too restrictive on players really complained about it, and they were saying that every 50-point or 60-point army or 500-point or 750-point army looked the same as every other. You could guarantee it. So what we tried to do, one of the core things from the start in version 2 was to try and lift that and step back and just say, okay, we're going to allow you a bit more freedom. But what that means, the problem with that is that if you allow people too much freedom, then they bring along a 30-point bastion, heavy mag cannon to an infantry battle, which is not much fun. So in order to try and balance that bit, we've said that actually you can only take some of the stronger, tougher units when you've actually got more points. And those point bands are called force levels. So you've got force level 1, which is up to about 75, 80. I'm just going to look at the rule book right now. Excuse me. So it's 30 to 85 as force level 1. Force level 2 is from 86 to 135 points. And force level 3 is from 136 to 170 points. And so on and so on. And it goes up by there. And there's a little table in the playing the game supplement. So at force level 1, you can take normally you can take your infantry, your lighter support weapons, you can take your lighter vehicles and that sort of stuff. And what happens is that within each selector, I don't know if you can pull it up or I can show it to you, the selectors show you how many of that unit you can actually take. I can switch my screen if you like.
No, I can pull it up.
We'll use movie magic.
Wow.
It'll appear as you speak about
exactly.
it.
And by movie magic, I mean I'm going to do drag and drop it on top of it.
So what we've tried to do is actually balance the number of units of a particular type you can take while still allowing this much greater flexibility. So sometimes you'll see there's only one allowed in a particular selector, but at other times the number of units you can take are limited by the force level. So at force level 1, you can only take one of a particular type of unit. And that really, really is to try and prevent the spamming of particular strengths or units which could unbalance the list. I mean, I have to say here, this is where I stop and step back and say, if you don't like them, ignore it all. Build your own list. I mean, we regularly build our own list and just nice if you tried this, and that's part of the fun of it. The point
is for matched scenarios because you have plenty of scenarios.
There's always the Warhammer, what is it, 7th edition Unbound lists. They're fun,
exactly,
but they're weird.
Okay, it's up to individuals, but these are the ones which we've play tested, which we know work and which we know have actually gone out and they've actually undergone some pretty testing review at the hands of there's a list master, David Horobin, who you've often seen on the Intel Facebook group and at other times, and he's gone into mapping Antares in a big way. He loves it. He used to be an astrophysicist, which is why he really loves mapping Antares. Mm-hmm. But he has got a really, really good mind for examining lists and exploiting them. And he wrote a whole series. He had a whole blog on Antares lists in version 1. He may do it on version 2. I don't know. I've invited him to do it on the Nexus in version 2. And he has got access, so we'll see what happens. So we've got people who've done that and have actually gone through it on pen and paper. We've actually tested every single one of these lists multiple times, any one of these selectors multiple times. So going back to the force level. So force level 1, if you like, is generally infantry. You'll find you can access infantry and that sort of stuff. Force level 2, you'll start getting in the heavier combat skimmers. So you'll be able to take, for example, a Concord list, you'll take a C3M4, you'll be able to take a heavyweight hauler, you'll be able to take the boosted Defiant or that sort of stuff. And that's generally starting to get into a vehicle heavy sort of list and that sort of stuff. Force level 3 and above, you can basically take almost anything you like. So that's where you'll find is you'll get your Bastions, your M25s, your M50s, your Matronites and that sort of stuff.
Now, you've talked about some of like the force level limitations. Are there any in version 1, there were like a lot of requirements, like all GAR armies had to have one battle suit. So again, like focusing on like the Laven Breeder list, are there any like things they have to have in order to be a Laven Breeder list?
Absolutely, there are. Within each selector, there are some core units. Now, these are based on the force level. The number of these is based on the force level. But these core units are those that most ably reflect the units that faction would normally field that selector. I'm reading off the playing the game thing here. The number of points you spend on it are up to you. It's purely a case of providing the core units are taken, you can upgrade them as you want. The number of core units is set by the force level, as I said, so it's sometimes force level +1. So, for example, a strike force, you have to take, I think it's force level +1 strike squads.
So okay, that makes sense.
There'd be 2 strike squads, three strike squads, or whatever. So all you could do is just spend points to buy those core units, and then you can actually spend the rest upgrading them or adding in more units you like. But again, that's there to actually try and make sure the lists are representative of the faction. You can see me going over here at the moment. So, for example, in the Boromite unit selector summary, which I'm sure you're going to have a look, it actually says, in a clan workface force, there must be at least force level number of work gangs, plus two more units taken from work gangs, engineer teams, and workface teams. So you've got to have at least one work gang in your 50-point force we're talking about. You can then take another work gang or an engineer team or a workface team. That's workface as support teams. So you've got a fairly broad core selection, but all of those units in the core selection are really tightly related to the selector itself and the role and the theme of that selector.
And so with the Laven Breeders, it would be, it's like Laven handlers and all that good stuff.
Yeah. In a Laven Breeder force, you must have at least one Lavenite handler, and then you've got to choose a number of units equal to the force level from another Lavenite handler if you wanted Rock Riders Commands, or Matronites. In other words, all the Laven units. So you could have any number of Rock Rider units. You could have, okay, fine, Laven Breeder force, I'll have my Lavenite handler, I'll take 2 or 3 Rock Rider units. And with the new speed alterations, you'll find that Rock Riders can be actually quite nasty.
So you can have a Boromite cavalry army now. That's so awesome.
Yeah, Boromite cavalry. And that's the whole idea of these selectors, so to try and allow a little bit more fun. And whilst everything's down at the unit level, i.e. in the recommended selectors, so you can have only one matriarch in a guild security Laven Breeder or clan workface force. You could have any number of Rock Riders and Laven Breeder force. You can have any number of Lavamite handlers as long as it's more than one in a Laven Breeder force. So that sort of stuff. And some of the other limits are just down to force level. Again, to stop that spam. But frankly, if you want to change it, then change it. You know, that's up to you to do. You know, these are just ones which we've tested and we've found work. So anyway, so that's the core units, and every single selector's got their own core units, and they're all slightly different. And then the selectors have got slightly different limitations based on the force level normally. And
that can be found listed along the bottom of every unit entry.
Yeah,
it will let you know, which is super convenient. I also noticed that I'm actually happy a lot of the units that required command units to be fielded prior to having like multiple units like interceptor squads and things like that has been removed, which I'm very happy about.
Yeah, that was something that was something we didn't really need on the whole. Sometimes it has to be there, or it's part and parcel of this certain selector, but on the whole you just don't. You know, we've tried to remove as much of those as possible while still retaining the balance in the lists, again, which goes back to this playability, as well as the feel, which goes back to narrative. And there again, I'm using the same two words, narrative and playability again. And that's what we're working on. Yeah, we're doing this for fun. And we want it to be fun, and that's what they do.
And to help with the narrative aspect of what you were trying to achieve, I know you had said this before, but basically all the core units that are make up the core of each list have been discounted to a degree to make them fit in that slot and make them more optimal, I guess.
Yeah, optimized. Yes, they have because there's several reasons there. Narratively, they are the units that are most likely to be taken by that force in that selector, in that type of tactical deployment. So they have been discounted. It's not too heavy, but it's enough. There's always a risk when you do that you discount them too much so that they become...
you don't want a 50-point list to be 5 Lavamite teams.
Yeah,
Because
absolutely.
It's like they're so points-wise attractive that you have to.
Absolutely. And so the discount is pretty consistent across the board, but you'll find that, for example, in the Boromites, for example, a work gang is 10 points. The security gangers happen to be 11 points because they've got a few more bits and bobs on them and they're a bit tougher. But the Lavamite handlers is 10 points as well. In strike squads, you'll find in the Concord list, you'll find the strike squads 10 points. And basically across the board. And that has been made up from all the options, just the same as we've said with the Boromite list. Probably Boromite's not as good an example, but one of the complaints which we got constantly was that why would people not take GAR with amplifiers? Why would people not take Concords with plasma lances and a spotter because it was too much? And why were units going into battle without grenades? Why were Boromites going into battle without their work-faced explosives? You know, they used it. Why would they just drop it and go out and fight somebody? They have it in their belts. Oh, yeah, here we go. I've got my fractal charge here. There we go. Have this. You know, so all the basic stuff is in the unit core points set up, so you don't have to worry about it, and that's across the board. So and that was again to address another criticism that we were faced with.
And I think I really like that you guys did that, because it has made, even though each unit is equipped with things that you are familiar with, just that basic loadout has added a lot of depth and richness to each of the unit. It really does make them all seem just a little bit more unique, because before you could take those, I mean, we played, hundreds of games where it's like you just take the basic loadout, and when that was the case, it did feel like a lot of the units became similar in structure, and so I really like that change. That was very cool.
Oh, good. I'm pleased you liked it. I mean, we found it actually worked, but also we found it gave more interesting tactical options or choices for the players. So when they're choosing their list, they're thinking about how they're going to play it, as well as actually fitting in with the narrative automatically. So they're just thinking, right, I've got that strike squad. They don't have to worry about anything else about it. They know they've got strike squad. They could add in a few more troops if they wanted to. But now they're into looking at the rest of it, how that strike squad's going to be supported by D1 drones, D2 drones, everything else. And that's I think a better place to think about I agree, narrative game. It really helps to play,
and there's still definitely cool upgrades. I was very pleased to see that the drop squad, the drop troops specifically for the Concord, can get fractal charges.
Ooh,
I love it.
That's nice
because they have underslung X-slings, so you load those babies up with some fractal charges, and all of a sudden, point blank shooting with the Concord is substantially more dangerous.
That's a bit. I have to say, the drop squads are now one of the more expensive infantry squads.
It's true, yeah. They're so cool though. I love them.
As are the Krads, but the thing is, you look at that and actually think, okay, well, hold on. If the drop squads, who are probably got some Kras blood in them anyway, if they're going to have fractal charges, I'm pretty sure that a Kras sergeant is going to go into his local drop troop armory and say, excuse me, my guys want some fractal charges, please.
Do you have any extra grenades?
Yeah. And if the Intel is not going to say, no, you don't want it, the Intel is going to say, well, actually, to be honest, it's probably good to have it.
So now with the ham sandwiches, fractal charges are arriving as well.
Exactly.
I love it. Good times. Now, army options are definitely still a thing, and I would actually argue that they're way cooler in whichever faction you're playing.
They're way spicier in version 2.
Yeah, well, that was one of the things there was several requests, some of which we just can't completely fulfill, because it would turn Antares too much into an abstract game rather than a tabletop fun narrative game. But we've tried to pull them in anyway, so that most armies now have unique army options, their own army options, which means so, for example, the Gar have got a bit of distort resistance. They can actually try and manipulate the distort dice with their distort interference,
which is awesome.
Yeah, and the Algrin have got some rather militaristic army options.
They're the coolest for sure.
Yeah, so we've tried to add a little bit more flavour to the army options. So for some armies, the costs of the options are a little bit more expensive than normal, but hey ho, and for others, you'd find them shared. So, for example, Concord and Senators can get a army option called Intel Boost, which comes free with a New Who, and that actually gives you an extra sort of order dice. It's not an order dice; it's an event dice, basically. But you can use that to actually give you a +1 bonus or something. You can actually use it to discard and say, no, I don't want to use that dice, I'm going to throw it away. You can use it to make a recovery test, an extra recovery test effectively. So it's not too much, but it's everything that you'd expect the Intel to be able to do. Against that, though, you can actually also take things like counter shard. So you're starting to get this idea of the Intel coming along, trying to twist things and make things up. But you, as an opponent, can actually say, no, I'm going to try and block that. So you use your own ECM, your own countermeasures, or whatever type they are, your own nanosphere, to try and block that use of the Intel dice. So it's that sort of thing. So we've sort of put the summaries of those at the back of all the lists. But the actual details of all of those are actually in the lists. So,
and it's 10%, right? You said of your similar to so I thought and then some of them come free. Attached to, like in the case of the Algrin, which I said was the coolest because it definitely is. Your commanders attach, like you get free army options, and that Intel boost comes free with New Who's, I believe, as well. Correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, and that's so the main thing with Algrin, who are very disciplined, very staid force, who actually rely on. Again, I'm talking about the narrative here, who rely on imaginative and really forward commanders. The specialist commanders, actually come with their own army options. And they bring them along, so they get one for free, but they enable that army to actually access those additional army options as well.
And is that something like, I know you had talked about re-adding in some of the special characters into, are they also going to have like army options and stuff like that?
They already have.
Oh, okay. I've not personally looked at the.
Yeah. So if you have a look at the, I'll open it up. But if you have a look at the Algren army list, as that's what we're talking about, you'll find that Taurus Gennar, who is basically a battlefield god almost.
Mm-hmm.
But he comes as a specialist counselor general, and he has 2 stoic army options, and he's got a courage under fire army option with him for free, effectively. But it's not free. Obviously, you've got to pay for him. But he actually then allows the army to actually take those stoic and courage under fire options as well. Whereas a normal Optimate sub-commander would just have stoic, but you could upgrade the command squad with a specialist tactical officer who gets the well-laid shot army option as well.
Okay, cool.
So you've got these tailorings which can go on in the Algren army just by taking specialist officers.
Yeah, it's super neat. And that's just like you said with the narrative. It's such a cool thing to add, and it plays so well into the narrative aspect of Antares that I love it.
Yeah. Next thing probably we need to look at, I would have thought, is probably what's next up, is sort of, I don't know, playing with allies, I suppose.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Which is the last thing. Effectively, you've the same as in version 1. You've got 3 different ways of working together. One is full cooperation. Basically, you say, I've got an Algren force and a Concord force. Not that this would ever happen. Let's change it. Change that, yes. Freeborn force and a Boromite force, and they were just going to be combined, and we're going to give them just 1 load of dice. That's full cooperation. 1 load of identical coloured order dice, and you can allocate it to any unit. Everything cooperates nicely. The next one is probably more likely, it's friends and foes, where effectively is you have 2 players, one on one force, one on the other, and if they want to, they can give their dice to the opponent when it's drawn. So if you're a Boromite player and your Boromite dice gets drawn up, and your Freeborn ally says, "Oh, I really, really need that order dice right now. Can I have it, please?" You can give it to him. And they can then use it to their own units. The difference is there, it's the same as in version 1. Command and follow doesn't really affect anybody else outside your own command, your own faction. And then finally, you've got Tense Alliance, which is basically 2 people on the table who don't actually really trust each other very well. They're not sharing anything. When you get your own order dice, that's it. You've got to allocate yourself. All it means is you're not going to hurt him, really. That's it. There's the allied list selection has obviously had to change because we've changed the points. But basically, for example, if you had a 150 point army with Boromites and Freeborn in it, either you allocate the points from that to your Freeborn, your Boromites. So you can say, I'll give the Freeborn 50 and I'll give the Boromites 100, say.
And then they're bound by like would that be a force level 1 Freeborn list and a force level 2 Boromite list?
It is, except for one variation, is that having taken their core units, they can. So, for example, you could say it's a force level 1 Vardosi, Vardnari, and Damari unit. You can now choose, for example, in that FL1 force, you could actually choose a FL3 option. So, for example, you
makes sense.
Yeah. So it means you can actually take the heavier weight, the FL3 option, so you're not too heavily disadvantaged by splitting your force up like that. But all it means is it's just the core options have to be taken, and you have to comply generally with the FL threshold. So that's it, really. It's
pretty simple.
Yeah, the FL threshold is just that FL3, so you're assuming FL threshold of 3, even though you've got to build up an FL1 and FL2 compliant list at the bottom end, if you see what I mean. So
So
that's it.
Allies are cool and all, but Mercenaries are way cooler. How do those work? I love Askar. How do I get them in there?
Yeah, well, the trouble is there was a mercenary list and a feral list in the original back in 2.8. We had dropped them when we went to 2.9. But we didn't get enough testing of the mercenary armies. We didn't get enough testing of the feral list, probably because there's not that many feral troops out there. So rather than just shove out some untested, very woolly lists, if you see what I mean, I just thought, no, I'm not going to give out ferals. I didn't think that was fair to people to say, we've got all these which have been heavily tested, and then these two which are just not. But they are there, and frankly, if you want to build your own feral force, you can probably do so by going to the freeborn army and using the ferals in that list. But because we didn't have ferals and mercenaries, who were both in their own right, could actually be used as a feral mercenary company or as a mercenary company. Never mind. You could actually also in there, they're the mercenaries for hire. So I didn't have anywhere else to place. We'd actually tested the Askar and the Huck under version 3, so I thought have to put them into somewhere. So I put them into freeborn as being the most obvious place at the moment. Is it an ideal place for them? No, really, they ought to be in their own mercenary list, but I just did not want to go ahead and shove out a list just for the sake of making a list up, which hadn't been tested. It's for me, that'd be unfair on people.
So they're basically now a unit that can be selected if you take a freeborn force.
Well, no, the mercenaries for hire you can take for anybody.
Oh, okay. I'll make sure. Okay.
Yeah, they just happen to be in the freeborn army list. So if you want, you can take a Herc or you can take an Askar. And yes, they've got their own restrictions, because if you take more than a few Askar, then you've got to take an Askar command squad. But that's it. They're the same as anything else. They've just got the mercenary subtype, special rule. Which means that they may break. But again, that's going straight back to the same things as in version 1. If you took a mercenary force and you ran out of units and you've got more mercenaries left than your own units, your mercenaries may turn and do...
Which is an awesome way to lose. There's a lot of ways to lose, but to have your bug warriors be like, you know what? We're calling our losses. These guys look more like a better opportunity. It wasn't you, it was us.
But also under that whole alliance and similar sort of stuff, you've got some restrictions onto allies which are all theme and narrative based. So for example, Gar won't work with panhumans. Gar could hire non-human species, like the Askar and Isaurians can't cooperate with units at all. Vol, we do mention some Vol, and we got some they've got some rules in there for Vol, but at the moment the Vol list is, I would imagine, at least 6 months off, if anything, at the earliest. But they're there just in case, rather than have to update them. So we've got some basic restrictions. Somebody asked me a question saying, where are the alliance restrictions for Boromites? And actually, I had to point out that it's the same as the alliance restrictions for Freeborn. If you say to a Boromite, we'll give you this asteroid, the Boromite will say, all right then, how many of us do you want? And the same with the Freeborn. If you say to a Freeborn force, we're going to give you 48 tons of titanium, the Freeborn's just going to say, make it 50. And we'll turn up. There's some forces which don't have any restrictions because of the nature of the universe.
Well, I don't know. You've done a fantastic job, because these new lists not only make Sergey, the points-loving tournament player, so happy because he knows they're all now field tested to an extreme degree, and then you have me, who I just don't even like to use army lists. I'm even happy too. It's phenomenal, and
it's a good balance.
And the focus on the, like you said, the pulling back to having them now just fill out that narrative feel much better than in version 1 is just my favorite aspect, and it's just made it the entire experience that much richer.
Good. I'm really pleased you like it, guys. I mean, I've really liked the lists. I've found they've worked really well, and everybody after that first hump, because it's different and people don't like it different. But I remember having exactly the same hump when I was faced with the version 1 list. So I'm thinking, what is this? You know, but so it's just different. So it'll be a bit of a hump, and the main thing is now that you don't get the stupidly cheap units unless they're meant to be stupidly cheap.
Well, Tim, we can't thank you enough for coming on and being a guest on the channel again. We love to have you, and we hope we'll have you back here soon for more of these kinds of videos. Looking at Antares 2. If you guys, the viewers, enjoyed watching this as much as we did talking about this stuff today, make sure to like the video and help us in our battle against the YouTube algorithm. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel if you haven't already done so, and you have notifications enabled so you can see when new videos like this come out. And if you want to support us even more, there are affiliate links, ability to buy t-shirts and other swag in the description below.
If you want to support our channel even further, you...
Yet again.
Go to our Patreon link and sponsor us on Patreon.
Yeah, see, Tim's a natural.
Yeah,
I love it.
Tim can do this. He's got no practice, and he just spits it out. And without further ado, we'll see you on the tabletop.